bodies of 4 Kenyan soldiers killed in a Somali base attack are returned to Nairobi. How mobile money is transforming the lives of millions. And the calls for a boycott of this year's Oscar ceremony is growing. We'll tell you why. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, we begin in Kenya, where the families of soldiers killed in Somalia on Friday are mourning as they await the return of their loved ones. 4 of the bodies of the soldiers killed in a Somali base attack have been returned to their homeland. Now, to tell us more about the attack and Kenya's military operation in Somalia is Simiyu Wirunga, who joins us by phone from Nairobi. He is a retired captain of the Kenya Defense Forces and a security analyst. Captain Wirunga, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent.
Now, we know Kenyans are really asking many questions, but first, from your personal assessment, is this one of the perhaps the biggest blow to Kenyan soldiers abroad?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at it in totality, Kenya has been engaging itself in Somalia for the last 3 or 4 years. And although we've not been given the numbers, our suspicion is that the casualties could be very high. And therefore, in terms of looking at the percentage, we can actually conclude that this could be not a blow, but I think the highest number of casualties that the Kenya Defense Forces has suffered for all the period they've been in Somalia.
Now, given that there have been similar attacks against UN base, Africa Union bases, one against the Ugandan soldiers and the other one against the Burundian forces, how is it that this could not be anticipated and prevented?
I think that is a question we are also trying to understand in this region, because when you look at the similarities and the way these things have been done, if you are having a central command that is functional, that is led by one commander within AMISOM, they should have anticipated this. They should have learned the lesson from the previous 2 attacks, and therefore having a central leader should have allowed AMISOM to come up with strategies to ensure that every time there's a change of guard, systems and mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that they don't get these surprises that we've just noticed as recent as last Friday. So personally, I want to imagine that probably AMISOM is taking a long time to learn lessons. Unfortunately, this has come at the expense of our soldiers who are based in Somalia. And the lesson that we've learned is very expensive, and we are hoping that in the future, this should not happen again.
Now, a question that many are asking, is Kenya's strategy succeeding or making headways in Somalia as they try to fight Al-Shabaab?
I think the problem we're having as a country is 2-pronged. One, we want to play within the war maneuvers of AMISOM. And 2, as a country, we have our own strategic interests in peace in Somalia. So when you try to combine the 2, I think we are sort of not being in a position of being well prepared to combine our unilateral security interests in Somalia and playing within the framework of the AMISOM deployment in Somalia. Therefore, yes, while we might say that Kenya is not really achieving much in terms of what it wants to do, I think we must understand that as a country, it must play within the framework of what AU has put in place through AMISOM troops.
All right, Captain Wirunga, thank you very much. We do appreciate your insight. Thanks to Simiyu Wirunga. He's a retired captain of the Kenya Defense Forces. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the Kenyan families of Kenyan soldiers who were killed in Somalia on Friday morning, and they're waiting for the return of their loved ones. 4 of the bodies of the soldiers killed in a Somali base attack have now been returned to Kenya. The victims' caskets, draped in Kenyan national flags, were received at Nairobi's Wilson Airport by defense officials who witnessed a military honor guard. Kenyan officials have not said how many soldiers were killed when Islamist extremist fighters attacked a base for the African Union peacekeepers in southwestern Somalia on Friday. The terrorist group Al-Shabaab, that has claimed responsibility for the attack, says about 100 Kenyans were killed in the attack. Kenyan Defense Secretary Rachel Omamo says that more bodies will be returned home to Kenya in the coming days.
This is a very somber moment for the Kenya Defense Forces and I think for the country at large. We again wish to re-emphasize our great appreciation to the people of Kenya that are supporting us with their love and compassion throughout this difficult time, for the Kenya Defense Forces and our families.
The Kenyan Defense Secretary says a search and rescue operation is still underway in Somalia.
Search, rescue and recovery operations are ongoing, and consequently we expect to receive more of our soldiers in the coming days, and we will keep you abreast of these developments as the operations continue. We continue to urge for patience in this matter. It is a complicated matter that we want to handle meticulously. We want to handle carefully for the benefit of the families of our soldiers.
The attack on the base in southwestern Somalia is the latest incident of an African Union mission in Somalia base being overrun by militants. Jihadist websites in Somalia claim that 12 Kenyan soldiers were captured. Al-Shabaab is known to exaggerate the number of troops it kills, while AMISOM and the countries that contribute troops to the force rarely give reliable tolls. Around 150 Kenyan soldiers were stationed at the Aldebe base. On Sunday, 4 injured soldiers were returned to Nairobi. In June, Shabaab killed dozens of Burundian soldiers when they overran an AMISOM outpost northwest of Mogadishu. The Islamist extremist militants are fighting to overthrow Somalia's internationally backed and AU-protected government. Although they have lost a lot of territory in Somalia, the terrorist group continues to launch attacks there as well as in Kenya. Well, the Communications Authority of Kenya has issued a new rule that users of cyber cafes must show a copy of the national identity card or birth certificate before surfing the internet. The government agency says the move is aimed at curbing terrorism and internet hacking. But some Kenyans think it will be little, if any good. It will do little or if any good at all. Lenny Rovaga reports from Nairobi.
Dennis Mulandi, an entrepreneur in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, goes through his database of clients. Mulandi, who is 24, has been running Beats Cyber Cafe for 4 years now. On average, about 100 customers frequent his establishment each day. But those customers will now have to show an ID to go online. Kenya's Communications Authority, which regulates internet use in the country, has issued a rule requiring all internet users at cyber cafes to produce identification cards or birth certificates. The authority says the move is designed to curb internet hacking and terrorism. But Mulandi says it is misplaced.
The other people who have their laptops at their houses, they have the internet. So those people, maybe they have their laptops in their houses. They may be the ones who are hacking the government, not the people who are coming to cybers, because we know all our clients.
Vincent Ochieng is a frequent customer of cyber cafes, which he says offer convenience of accessing the internet at an affordable price. He says the new rule will restrict freedoms guaranteed in Kenya's constitution.
There are violations to our freedom of association, freedom of movement, and I believe that it will curtail many businesses, because we want to feel free. If you're going to browse, if you're going to exchange information, don't want to be like the police is watching over us.
Dr. Felix Odimasi, an expert on international law and diplomacy at the University of Nairobi, doubts the new law will have the desired effect.
They're not going to curb terrorism because terrorists do not necessarily use cyber cafes. I don't think that there are any cases that have been investigated that link terrorism to the use of cyber cafes especially.
Kenya's Communications Authority declined several requests to be interviewed for this story. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, German officials say they want to limit migration from North Africa by declaring Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia safe countries. Authorities say this will cut the chances of citizens of those countries of being granted asylum to virtually zero. This initiative follows outrage over the sexual attacks on women in Cologne on New Year's Eve that were blamed predominantly on North African migrants. Those charges sharpened the national debate about the open-door refugee policy adopted by Chancellor Angela Merkel. Germany has borne the brunt of Europe's biggest refugee influx since World War II. Slightly more than 1 million asylum seekers arrived in the country in 2015, most fleeing war and poverty in Syria, Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, is Ebola back? Did it never go away? Stay with us.
For a healthier planet.
Residential homes are estimated to be responsible for about a third of the United Kingdom's greenhouse gas emissions. But researchers at Cardiff University hope to change that with what they consider to be a blueprint for a positive energy home, one that gives back more energy than it uses.
The innovation is combining the renewable energy supply, storage and demand technologies together.
Jo Patterson is project leader on the Sulzer House at the Welch School of Architecture. She says most of the technologies are widely available to consumers. The home is built with high levels of insulation for low air leakage and solar panels on its roof. Here's Sulzer House architect Esther Coma.
The photovoltaic panels transform the radiation energy from the sun and they convert this energy into electricity.
With a construction price of around $190,000, researchers also tried to make the three-bedroom house affordable and attractive to a typical home buyer. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Well, it's time for our Tuesday Health Report, and joining us now is Africa 54 Health correspondent Lino Madu with an update on Ebola. Hello, Lino.
More than 100 people have been quarantined in Sierra Leone after coming in contact with a woman who died of Ebola last week. Officials say 28 of those people are at high risk. The World Health Organization last week declared that all known chains of transmission have been stopped in West Africa after Liberia joined Sierra Leone and Guinea in going 6 weeks with no reported new cases of Ebola. However, the WHO warned of possible flare-ups as survivors can carry the virus for months. Nearly 4,000 people died before Sierra Leone was first declared free from transmission on November 7th. Observers say this latest event highlights the potential for the disease to spread just as the deadliest outbreak on record appeared to be over. Ebola has killed more than 11,000 people, mostly in Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea, since this outbreak emerged in late 2013. Joining us live via Skype is Dr. Ibrahima Sousefal, World Health Organization's representative and head of the United Nations Mission for Ebola Emergency Response. Dr. Fall is based in the WHO's Regional Office for Africa in Brazzaville and joins us today from the organization's headquarters in Geneva. Dr. Fall, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So last week, the West Africa was declared free of Ebola, and then a day later, someone was reported to have died of the virus. What went wrong, Dr. Fall?
Thank you very much. I think WHO declaration was very clear. On the 14th of January, WHO declared the end of the outbreak, meaning that all the known transmission chain has been stopped for more than 42 days. So in this declaration, WHO warned countries to tell them there is still residual risk since we have a number of survivors who can still carry the virus. So this is not something we didn't expect, and countries also were informed about that and were getting ready to be able to rapidly detect any residual transmission of Ebola. So this is not something we didn't anticipate.
So as we anticipated this to happen, perhaps, what was being done to prevent this to happen, though?
If you look at, even after the end of the outbreak in the 3 countries, the work was still going on. We have more than 1,000 WHO experts in the field working with partners in the country to reinforce the surveillance and to build rapid response teams to make sure that countries will be able to rapidly detect and respond to any new outbreaks.
So what is the situation currently? Where do we stand? More than 100 people have been put in quarantine. What is happening?
As you know, when you have a case of Ebola, it's important to identify all the potential contact, meaning the people who may have been in contact with the case. So that's what the authority in Sierra Leone have been done, and they have identified around 100 people who are under surveillance, meaning they will be monitored to make sure that if there is any secondary case, it will be picked up very quickly and taken care of.
So does this raise concern that the outbreak may perhaps start again? How much should we be concerned?
I think the situation is different from last year or 2 years before because, you know, the 3 countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, have now the capacity to detect and respond very quickly to any new outbreak. So we are not expecting an expansion of this outbreak because the country and the partners are working together to make sure that this will be contained very quickly.
Now, Dr. Fall, a lot of people, observers, have criticized the WHO for not responding quickly and really raising the awareness as to the danger of this outbreak when it was happening in the beginning. What has changed this time around? What are the lessons learned?
I think many things have changed because if you look at the beginning of the outbreak, the countries didn't have the capacity to detect and respond very quickly. And partners themselves were not ready to respond in a well-coordinated manner in an outbreak of this magnitude. And since that time, we have learned a lot. More capacities are available at country level, and partners have learned to work together to rapidly support the countries based on their competitive advantage. I think the situation is completely different right now. And WHO is going through a reform process, taking into account the lessons learned from this outbreak to make sure that, you know, the response to any type of outbreak or emergency will be more quicker, more stronger, and well coordinated.
And quickly, before we go, what are the priorities then moving forward?
The priorities are at different levels. At country level, everything related to health security, meaning integrated disease surveillance and capacity to respond very quickly is important because the first line responders are at country level. Within partners and WHO, we need really a system where we'll be able to trigger international mechanism for coordinated and comprehensive response to all types of emergencies, including outbreaks.
Okay, Dr. Fall, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that was Dr. Ibrahima Sosé Fall. He is the World Health Organization's representative and head of the United Nations Mission for Ebola Emergency Response. Now, the United Nations World Food Programme says about 14 million people face hunger in southern Africa because of a drought that has been exacerbated by an El Niño weather pattern. The WFP says the worst affected country is Malawi, where 2.8 million people, or 16% of the population, are expected to go hungry. The Indian Ocean island of Madagascar is next, where almost 1.9 million are at risk. Third is Zimbabwe, where 1.5 million people, more than 10% of the population, faces hunger. The drought has hit much of the region, including the maize belt in South Africa, the continent's most advanced economy and the top producer of the staple grain. South Africa is confronting its worst drought in decades after 2015 was the driest calendar year since 1904. Expectations of a dire crop this season could force the country to import up to 6 million tons of maize, over half of its consumption needs. Now, toxic water is causing major headaches in the Midwestern U.S. city of Flint, Michigan. The state's governor is under fire for ignoring the city's water problem, where the supply is so contaminated with lead that it cannot be used for drinking or bathing. VOA's Latika Hoke reports.
About 70 guardsmen have been sent to Flint to help distribute bottled water, filters and testing kits to about 100,000 residents who cannot use their tap water. Flint residents have complained for some time about the strange odor and color of the water coming out of their taps, but apparently nothing has been done for as long as a year. Local children show increased levels of lead in their blood, which means they are at risk of permanent brain damage. Governor Rick Snyder is under fire for the state's slow response to the warnings.
If the kids in a rich suburb of Detroit had been drinking contaminated water and being bathed in it, there would have been action. So I sent my top campaign aide down there to talk to the mayor of Flint to see what I could do to help.
President Barack Obama on Saturday declared a federal emergency in Flint, freeing up to $5 million in federal aid to help solve the public health crisis, but he denied the governor's request for a disaster declaration. Civil rights activist Jesse Jackson urged Flint residents to fight for their rights during a visit Sunday.
This is a disaster zone, not just an emergency. That maybe there should be a duct tape around the city because Flint is a crime scene.
Filmmaker Michael Moore, a native of Flint, also blamed the governor for the water crisis and urged President Obama to visit the city.
Water infrastructure of this city has been destroyed, and it's been destroyed by the governor of this state.
Flint's water supply system became contaminated with lead in early 2014 after the city switched its supply source from Lake Huron to the Flint River to save money while the city waited for construction of a new pipeline to the lake. But corrosive water caused lead to leach from the old pipes. The water supply was switched back to Lake Huron last month, but contamination remains a concern because of damaged pipes and other infrastructure. State officials are under investigation. Laritza Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
That's our Africa Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's Health Reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Now, for years, mobile money, possibly Kenya's most successful invention, has been leading the way with an innovative mobile phone technology called M-Pesa. That technology has transformed the lives of millions of people. Africa 54's Paul Ndiho was recently in Kenya and has this report.
Paying for merchandise through your mobile phone has been made extremely easy, thanks to Kenya's world-leading mobile money transfer system, M-Pesa. Launched in 2007 by Safaricom, the country's largest mobile network operator, it's now used by over 15 million Kenyans, equivalent to more than two-thirds of the adult population, and around 25% of the country's gross national product flows through it. M-Pesa is not just a money transfer service. Especially here in Nairobi, it has revolutionized the way business is done. People are using M-Pesa to transact nearly any kind of business you can think about, from paying their utility bills to buying merchandise in a store. Bessel Omondi, a student at Kenyatta University, says M-Pesa is the best thing that has happened to Kenyans in a long time.
I think M-Pesa has made sending money, like money transaction, very easy, whereby I get money through the phone.
M-Pesa was originally designed as a system to allow microfinance loan repayments to be made by phone, reducing the costs associated with handling cash, thus making it possible for lower interest rates. But after pilot testing, it was broadened to become a general money transfer scheme.
I usually do the transaction to help the customer to withdraw the money or to deposit their money.
How many customers do you get a day?
For a day, I can get for about 200 customers.
The success of M-Pesa has no doubt taken the whole world by surprise. Operators in some other countries are doing an increasingly good job of imitating it. William Baria Nyangweso is a regular customer and explains how it works.
You come and then now like this one is okay. Then you take your ID. Then you're able now to come out, because once you leave this place and the amount is less, you cannot come back.
Baria Nyangweso says that M-Pesa's business model is particularly useful in a country where many people don't have access to banks. Those who work in cities often send money back home to their families in rural villages.
Safaricom has done, particularly on the transfer, it's a significant impact, you can say. And so the small enterprises, the women now, the technology that Safaricom is using is something that you don't need to go to class to learn. That unless you have issue with numerical numbers. But an old mama can send you 100,000 by just pop and doing that.
Philip Moganda, a resident of Mombasa, says M-Pesa is the new reliable way to send and receive money. Some Kenyans say storing money on M-Pesa is safer than the banks.
I think M-Pesa has brought money to ordinary people's pockets. Anytime, it saves us the hassle of going to the bank and queuing all the time. So it is a good thing. However, I think personally I'll bless the person who came up with M-Pesa.
Economic analysts say some of the factors behind M-Pesa's success cannot be copied, but many of them can, which means it should eventually be possible for other countries to follow Kenya's pioneering example. Last November, the Kenyan operator Safaricom reported a 24% jump in M-Pesa revenue. Its active user base also climbed to 15.7 million people, accounting for nearly $190 million in transactions. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
And welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Esther Gidhui. Here's what's trending. Calls for a boycott of the Academy Awards are growing over the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences' second straight year of mostly white nominees. Director Spike Lee and actress Jada Pinkett Smith each say they will not attend this year's ceremony. Pinkett Smith, whose husband Will Smith wasn't nominated for his performance in the NFL head trauma drama Concussion, said it was time for people of color to disregard the Academy Awards. This year's host, Chris Rock, unveiling a new promotion for the broadcast called the ceremony the White BET Awards. And that's what's trending today, Vincent.
And that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
This word comes from a story about negotiations and Iran's nuclear program.
There would be 6 months of negotiations on more extensive limits on Iran's nuclear program and potentially an end to the devastating sanctions. Iran says it does not want to build a nuclear bomb, but the UN Security Council wants agreed limits and strict verification.
The word verification means to confirm something, to make sure it is true.
In this story, the United Nations wants to confirm that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Inspectors could provide verification about Iran's nuclear programs.
Now, the next time you hear verification, you will know what this news word means.